Hello everyone and welcome to Reddit News Daily. Today we'll be talking pro-revenge, in which people get revenge against their terrible bosses, managers, and even landlords. Our first post is from Call Me Swellington. The girl Friday with a PhD takes over the business from an ungrateful owner. This is a long tale. It is also a textbook case of why you don't abuse loyal associates. My spouse was the second person hired at a consultant company in a very specialized industry. In her 15 years with the firm, it grew to a respectable 3-office, 8 to 10 employees at each location entity. She and the owner grew the business on the contacts, expertise, and presentation of my wife, to the extent that my wife's abilities and education were the main reason the new business came through the door. Over the years, her scope of responsibility grew so that the owner was basically 75% absent and mostly unaware of day-to-day activity. As he got more and more removed from the business, he would make overtures that he would eventually retire and sell her the business. He was so dependent on her income generating that he took out a life insurance policy on her. I did not involve myself too much, but as a major industry dinner party I attended with her, he introduced my wife to the table as my girl Friday, basically a secretary, which was weird. Over the years, she tried to get an agreement in place to buy the firm, even if it was years away. He always delayed and made promises but never followed through. I told her, "This guy doesn't respect you or your contribution. He will never sell you the business because there's no reason to. He can make more money by stringing you along, and essentially, you are the business. Why would he sell it to you?" One day, out of the blue, my wife received a raise bonus, a very minor amount of money, and a contract that included a non-compete, non-disclosure agreement. After reading it, she realized that the owner was trying to lock her down from leaving for another firm. She had been getting feelers from other companies. To make things even more suspicious, she received a call from a competitor who said they were in the final stages of due diligence and wanted to ask to meet her. This butthole was selling the company and didn't think to tell or ask her if she was interested in buying it. She ignored the agreement, and there were no other agreements in place. She was totally free. My wife is extremely loyal. She has missed so many special days working for this guy, stuck around when they were wobbly, even skipped paychecks when there were tough financial times. She was furious, the absolute menace I have ever seen her. We discussed starting her own firm, and I asked, well, how much business is contractually obligated to stay there if you leave? It turned out that most agreements were either handshakes or 30-day at will. I asked how many would leave with you. She said about 75%, including her biggest source of revenue, who didn't even know the owner. In a very short time, my wife took a 3-week vacation. She had months and months of unused time, during which she set up and rented an office in the same building and made all the arrangements to set up a new shop. She agreed to leave any and all company property behind and do her best to give the old company no obvious ammo for litigation. She called her clients and said, "I'm leaving. If you want to look into relocating your account with my new company, you'll need to quit the old one before we can discuss it." Most understood the implication. While she was on vacation, she received a panic call from her boss. "We've just lost XYZ company. Do you know anything about it?" She said, "I'm sorry, but I just sent you an email. I resigned. All my keys and company stuff is on my desk. Bye-bye." The new firm took basically 90% of the business and seamlessly transitioned into the same company as it was before, but with a new owner. Even most of the office staff would come aboard. Within a year, her old company closed down, except for the small office her old boss ran. She sees him once in a while and just scowls at her. See, this is the reason why I worked for a place that respects its employees instead of a place that doesn't respect its employees, like my first job. And I ended up leaving for a better job. She did the right thing. Her husband realized what was going on and could just string her along, and eventually she started her own company and took the business with her. Good luck, and good story. Our next post is from Arson Biblio 12. So this is my first ever post, so apologize if it's not up to standards. Long time lurker on this site, so I figured I might as well tell my story. Here is some backstory for you. Several years ago, my mom was dating this nice man with 2 kids. My younger brother and I liked the boy himself, but his kids were another story. His kids were entitled jerks that always got away with what they wanted, constantly stole our toys, and were generally a nuisance to be around. I always tried to be a better person, but my brother and I were constantly getting into arguments with them due to their pettiness. They weren't even the worst part of the relationship. The boyfriend's ex-wife was. From my perspective, I felt that she was the type of person that if she couldn't have him, nobody could. She made my mother's and our lives heck, constantly filing false complaints about our side of the family, generally pointed at my brother and I, from harassment to claiming I had stolen the son's toy, which was the other way around, and going after the boyfriend claiming he was an unfit parent. Several times she tried and ruined any plans we had come up with. For example, after spending months planning a trip to New York, last minute she blew a fuse and demanded we cancel the trip so that she could take her own trip with them. We had already gotten written agreement from her. One time she even demanded the older son and I visit a family therapist. After pointing out all the blame on me, I was told my side of the story. It resulted, without the therapist fully implying, that they agreed I was in the right and then storming out of the room. Among many other reasons, even after my mom and her boyfriend had gotten engaged, the ex-wife was the biggest reason why my mom decided to call off the engagement. The harassment and drama were just too much for us. It broke her heart to do so, but she made us the priority and got us out of that situation. A few years after the breakup, my small family and I were living happily. I never saw the kids or the dude again. My mom still had kept in touch with the former boyfriend, but after some time apart, she's been the faults in him too. I was in the 8th grade and living life happily. That was until ex-wife stepped into the gym class one day. Apparently, since the breakup, she had gotten her teaching degree and became a substitute teacher. She was now replacing our normal gym teacher who was on maternity leave, as well as acting as the assistant teacher for one of our health education classes. Basically, now I had to see her pretty much every other day for the rest of the school year. At first, she didn't recognize me. Puberty had hit me hard, changing my appearance drastically, especially for someone who hadn't seen me in like 5 years. Eventually, she recognized my name, and that's when the harassment began anew. All of it was snide remarks about my appearance, constantly pointing me out as an example as to what puberty can negatively do to you. Pimples, facial hair, voice cracking, that sort of stuff, to the class as if I was the only one dealing with it. The main health teacher didn't know about it either. Basically, everyone in the 8th grade was taking sex ed at the same time. It was technically one extremely large class, but split up into male and female groups, and wasn't I lucky that the ex-wife got the male half, mine. I told my mom about it immediately, and she was livid. She sent me multiple emails to the school requesting that they switch teachers or at least let me take the class online. It all fell on deaf ears until, with the help of the ex-boyfriend, we showed them the dozens of emails, phone calls, and messages all spouting harassment at my family and I. This resulted in her being fired from the school and basically being blacklisted from our school district and the surrounding area. If she wanted another teaching job, she would have to find it elsewhere. This resulted in a major legal battle between her and the ex-boyfriend because she had tried to move out of state with the kids without his nor the court's permission. Apparently, she lost custody of the kids and had to go back to her old job. Don't know what that was. All in all, it was an interesting experience. We cut all ties with that entire family after the whole ordeal and went on with our lives. I'm now a sophomore in college, waiting out the lockdown in my state. while my mom still hasn't had a long-term relationship since then, mostly sticking to online dating. One of them turned out to be a pedo, but that's a story for another day. But she's happier than she's been in a long time. Thank you for reading. As stated before, I've never done something like this, so I apologize for any issues. I thought you might all enjoy a new story during these trying times. Edit. Thank you for all the kind words. This is literally my first post ever, so I agree that it is very borderline pro. I just like to make it clear that my mother and I had no real involvement with her losing custody. All we had wanted was to get me away from her at school. There was a whole lot of things that led to it. Her being fired could have just been the last thread. For those of you who are wondering, I had mentioned earlier about a pedo near the end. It's really short. Basically, a few months after another breakup, my mom finds out that his ex, not the ex-fiancé in the story, was arrested for trying to sleep with a preteen. Well, good revenge story, OP. So glad that you were able to get rid of her and get her fired, because obviously when she saw your name, she was thinking, now I'm gonna get you. But with the help you had around you, you were not only able to get her fired, but she apparently lost her children. And but if her children are acting entitled and she's acting entitled, then she doesn't need to be in the education system at all. Anyways, about sex ed though, I do remember that I was forced to take sex ed in my sophomore year because, well, me and my wife were pregnant. And yes, I mean wife. I actually got legally married at 16 because I wanted to, not because I had to. And we're still together this day. That's how much I love her. Our tree will destroy your driveway. Some background. By North American standards, our house is old. It is really old. It's older than the town. Hell, it's in the Confederation. The house was originally built by a merchant from the area like 200 years ago. It's old. With its age comes a very big property line, and apart from a couple adjustments here and there to account for infrastructure and housing development, it's basically changed from 100 years ago. It rarely ever comes up here, but in any dispute relating to property lines, the official town plans takes precedent, and our property line crosses over into our neighbor's property. This will be important later. Full disclosure, this happened almost 5 years ago, so my memory of this is a little fuzzy at times. However, the major player here confirmed that it's accurate enough to get the story across. So I'm going with it. It's also kind of lengthy, so there's a TLDR at the end. And now for the two major players in this tale. Our butthole neighbor, who we will call Lumpy. He's just the worst. He ran an illegal chop shop in his backyard, and it seemed to be deathly afraid of trees. He also always took a 2-week-long vacation in the summer, and it was always at the end of July. This part is also important later. The other one is my dad. At the time, he was in government oversight, but before that, he was in the Department of Justice, and his major responsibilities included training crown attorneys. This included the attorneys general in the pecking order. Dad was actually pretty low, but the crown knew and respected him, and they even keenly aware that Dad knew the law inside and out. If there was anything even remotely resembling a legal dispute, Dad was almost always in the right with his argument. Now we begin our tale. The site. The line between our yard and Lumpy's was pretty clear. Our side was grass, Protestant lilies, shrubs, and trees. His was a gravel driveway. Before the incident, there was a large Manitoba maple tree growing there. It was very old, but grew in such a way that it blocked just enough sunlight to have a pleasant level light going through the window. We had no intentions of ever removing it, maybe trim it a little if it got too close to the windows. However, some lower branches were sagging onto Lumpy's driveway, So he asked if he could cut down some of the lower branches so that his car wouldn't get damaged when he drove in and out. It was a fair enough request, and he did ask permission first, so we told him to get a landscaper and get a quote, because we sure as hell weren't going to let Lumpy do it, and we were okay paying for that. A couple of days later, we were all on a day trip somewhere, and when we got back, Lumpy comes over and tells us not to worry about the landscaper because I took care of it. Red flags were waving at that statement. So we went and checked the tree. The butthole cut down the entire tree, then to add insult to injury, he painted the stump with some sort of weird gray stuff. Don't know what it was, but it had to have been toxic as heck because nothing ever grew on this stump again, not even fungi. So we're understandably mad, but unfortunately there's nothing we can do about it because there's no proof. So now we've got a stump that was once a beautiful tree, a smug neighbor, and seemingly no course of action to take. Dad didn't accept that scenario, and he had a plan. The plan. As I said earlier, Dad knew the law inside and out, so he began to plan things out. He made a few phone calls to the town's civil architect, a couple inspectors, the local landscaper Lumpy was going to get that quote from, and a contractor. He visited City Hall and got a copy of the official town plan, which, remember, is the final word on property lines. He had everything arranged, and now he began to wait. The revenge. Like clockwork, Lumpy went on vacation, and the plan was enacted. Over the course of 2 weeks, we expanded. We rebuilt our fence to the new dimensions, rearranged the shrubs, dug up the gravel driveway, and put fresh dirt and grass over it, and planted a weeping willow in a spot where, as it grew, would always hang and shed into Lumpy's yard. With the expanded fence and shrubbery, Lumpy's driveway was a small strip of pavement, maybe half a meter wide. The fence placed an old dying maple and a hawthorn on her side, but because of how the two trees grew, most of it was on Lumpy's side. The key point is that the placement of the trunk dictates whose property it's on. So it's our tree that he can't touch, no matter how annoying or destructive it is. With the new dimensions, the chop shop he was running was now on our side of the fence, but because it was illegal, it was just a scrap metal as far as the law was concerned, so we sold it to a local scrapyard. By the time Lumpy came back, our yard had expanded almost 3 meters into his yard, and waiting for him was Dad, the civil architect, and a lawyer with a stock of documents outlining in full detail that what they did was 100% legal, and there wasn't a thing he could do about it. Too long, didn't read. Our butthole neighbor illegally chopped down our tree, so we illegally destroyed his driveway. OP posts a couple of updates. Not sure how it happened, but it was supposed to say that when he told Lumpy to get the quote, and that we paid for the landscaper because we didn't want Lumpy to do it himself. Aftermath. Lumpy apparently tried to press charges, something along the lines of trespassing or destruction of property or something ridiculous like that. I had moved out of town at the time, so I don't know for sure what happened, but I like to think the judge just threw the case out. Like I said, everything was above board and completely legal. What I do know he did was tear up part of his lawn and put in a new driveway. He still had room for it, but it also cut his lawn in half. And he had to pay to have the sidewalk adjusted into a ramp. Also, because the town was paying attention now, he had to have it done properly, with like asphalt and stuff instead of gravel like before. He also apparently planning on moving out and rent the property to others. Okay, OP has to post a third edit. Explanations. Okay, I feel the need to include a couple things just to make sure everything relevant is known. Adverse possession. Under Canadian property law, adverse possession takes place after a number of years of continuous, notorious, and open possession. In Ontario, it means that for 10 continuous years, the squatter has to be openly using the land and making no attempt to hide that fact. However, it had been 20 years before the land can be legally changed over to the squatter's name for absolute ownership. Lumpy had been living there for more than 10 years, but less than 20. He could make a possession claim, but not an ownership claim. None of it applied to him anyways for two reasons. 1. He only openly claimed the driveway and never the backyard. For him to claim the part of his backyard we repossessed, he'd have to admit to the illegal chop shop's presence, or he'd have to claim it was a ridiculously large pile of scrap metal. In either case, it would be removed because having either violated a town bylaw. And a side note, when fences were moved and the chop shop was on our side, we, being legally obligated, had everything involved hauled away and used scrap part on the very substantial payment for the metal to pay the fine for having a large scrap metal pile on our property. Like I said, Dad kept everything above board. And 2. In Ontario, under the Land Titles Act, a property owner can convert their ownership to land title ownership. In situations like this, the squatter has to have been using the land for a minimum of 10 years before the property was converted to a land title. For example, a property was converted in 1985. The squatter has to have been there since at least 1975 to be able to make a claim. My parents closed on this house in 1993, and my dad made certain that the property was converted to a land title because he immediately had an extension built, and the land title ownership made the paperwork easier. Somehow. I don't know the details. I'm just a library technician, not a legal expert. Point being that Lumpy would have been using that area since at least 1983 for him to claim adverse possession, and he moved into his house about 3 years after us and made the driveway not long after. We didn't care much. The bushes and fence line were in place long before we moved in. But we also knew that he was using our land if it ever came to that, which it obviously did. So basically, Lumpy had no legal leg to stand on to make a case for adverse possession. And that was the final update I've seen. Thank you for listening. This has been Reddit News Daily. Today we're discussing prorevenge. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up, like. Also, remember to subscribe for daily updates as I am posting daily. I've now gotten over my cold a little bit more and my voice has come back. So look for daily posts from me and enjoy it and have a good day.